if you look at like a lot of people that maybe aren't even in design, they'll be vibe coding, and like building stuff. A lot of it is going to look the same, which means that the experience will matter most.
Taking your case specific, when is that moment when a consumer says, you know what, Josh got this amazing app, I'm going to use it because it's better and because I love Josh, versus using it for free on my Monzo? I mean, at least 99% of people don't have like an answer, like how to build
Yeah.
something, in this day and age of AI. Like everyone just keeps playing, but there's no answer really. So hello everyone, welcome to the Visionary Vibes podcast. I think it's been a while since I've done these, but I'm very excited to introduce Josh, who actually I met recently on Threads, right? And we've been just engaging there. But the reason why I wanted to bring you onto this podcast is you've built a lot of stuff. You've been designing a lot of stuff. And again, the way I see it, I'll obviously give you a chance to introduce yourself, but I think there's three things we can really dive into today. Obviously, you building a product, and I'm very curious to hear more about how you're planning to compete with the giants. The second thing is, I mean, you're probably seeing on Threads all of the vibe coding stuff. So I'm curious to hear more about what is the moat in this day and age when vibe coding is that big, right? And I think the third thing I'm very curious to hear more about is how AI will change UI UX, because the whole experience is changing, and you building so many products and being in so many different markets, specifically because I've seen you've been doing stuff in the healthcare space with AI powered symptoms checker, and then what was it, Fat Llama, right?
Yeah.
That was as well there. Yeah, I've seen a lot of ads on the tube, like not like a year ago, 2 years
For
ago.
Fat Llama?
I think so.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
that's
Okay.
how I actually remembered it. So,
Oh, wow.
but yeah, you go. Tell me, just give a quick intro.
Yeah, let's do it. Dude, super excited. Great questions. Let's run. So I'm Josh. I'm a product designer here in London. I've been a designer for, I think, nearly 15 years. So it's been a long time. And as you'd laid out, like I've worked for a bunch of startups here in London. I think that's one thing I love about my experience. I've been very lucky to work for like all kinds of different startups, like health, IoT, banking, and yeah, it's given me a lot of flavor of like things I'm interested in, or bring different experiences that I can bring to like what I'm building. So yeah, previously I was working for an American startup just before this called Gather. So people might
I
remember.
actually like it.
Yeah.
It's super cool.
Yeah,
I mean,
Gather's
this whole
crazy.
like digital office idea. It's gather.town in case anyone wants to check it out.
That's right.
Pretty cool, like how you can actually manage like a team and have it like fully remote, but then you've got these mini rooms. I think it's a vibe. Like I'm not sure about the product market fit and like and a lot of other things, but what I can tell, I think it's a vibe. Like if you have the whole team there, that I think that's cool.
Yeah, it's awesome, dude. I think like remote is quite. It doesn't have the same like in-office feeling and the kind of rapport you can get. So yeah, Gather's doing some very cool things just to bridge that connection in a remote team, and they are like a proper A-player team. So it was also hard to step away from them. It was my last day on Friday. Today's Wednesday of the next week. And now I'm full time on Orbit, so we can dive into that. And for anyone that's not aware, Orbit is a subscription tracker that helps you manage all the things you pay for on a monthly basis, but in a very unique way. So we can dive into that and
I think
all the
I
other
think
questions.
the cool thing is this is a unique moment for you. It's probably going to be the first video, right? Well, like where you actually working full time in Orbit.
That's right. Yeah, this is it. So great. I love it. Yeah, it's really nice to kind of just like start this journey fresh and chat to you about it. It's awesome.
Yeah, I think I mean, since you already mentioned Orbit, just to get started, maybe just tell the story, like why and how and what you're doing right now with it.
Yeah, perfect. So the story of Orbit is very interesting because it took a long time to actually get here. So in August 2023, so almost a year and a half ago-ish, I was working for a company and I started to feel very burnt out and a bit lost. So I actually decided to take a few months off, and Orbit was something that came as an idea of, one, I just wanted to get back into building again. I've built like tons of stuff over the years because I've always been like curious. And this
We'll
was just
put your website here because I've seen the list, man. It's impressive.
oh
Like, honestly,
yeah,
we'll
yeah,
have
yeah.
it like somewhere here.
Yeah, a bunch of like everything from like iOS games to when we're in the pandemic, everyone was like live streaming instead of going out. So we tried to make that a better experience of like joining live streams and stuff. So I hadn't built anything in a long time, and I was really yearning to build a Swift app again and just like follow my curiosity. This is something I'll probably talk about a little bit in the pod. And at the time, I decided to take a few months off, and I started to get, very cautious of like, damn, what am I spending these next 3 months? Like, how much is that going to cost me? And you probably need to like be a bit more, cautious with that. And
Especially living in London. Just for the record, both of us. I actually didn't even know Josh lives in London too, but anyway. So, yeah.
Why? For anyone that's like not living in London, there's a meme of like you walk outside and then you just have to pay like £20, for no reason. Like, so yeah, exactly. I was like, okay, what am I spending for the next 3 months whilst I kind of just rest a bit and figure out like my next steps after being a little bit burnt out from my job. So this is August 2023. November 2023, I started to have the idea for Orbit and built a very, very basic prototype, which I really just did not know how to build. So I actually gave up on it. So that was like the very first moment I tried Orbit. And then throughout the start of 2024, I started working for GatherTown, which we just talked about. And that was awesome. It was exactly what I needed at the time. Wanted like this really creative job with just an A-player team. Like I really wanted to work with like awesome people. So that came at a perfect time. But that itch, was never scratched of like really diving into Orbit and like building a product. And it was also like tied in subconsciously to like, I've always had this dream, for 12 years. And that's something I tweeted about recently. Like I've always wanted to build a small software business, and it's just been something in me that I never got to explore. So I started diving into it again. I tried building Orbit. It really was just so hard because I have some Swift experience, but I just didn't have enough to really get it going. And then everything changed when like Cursor came out, and now you could use AI to like help you build the things that as a designer are just like way beyond my skill set. And that's when everything changed, July 2024, where I started to build the very first version.
That's pretty insane. But again, back to kind of like, I think my main question would be, look, I think Monzo, I use Monzo, and I think Monzo has the subscription tracker built into the app.
Absolutely.
So what was that reason? Like, what was the, the opportunity, the gap that you saw there and you thought, okay, this is worth building? Or was it just an experiment just to see how it goes and you still don't have an answer? Like, what was there really?
Yeah, no, dude, this is such a good question. I also love Monzo. I'm user something like 3,000 in the settings because Monzo, when Mondo came out, I was heavily inspired because I was working in like Santander, which if for people that are not in London, is just like a traditional bank. And I was working in the team as a designer, and I saw how slowly they were moving and how fast Mondo was moving at the time. So I was really inspired. I was like, man, this team is amazing. So been a big fan of them for a long time. And yeah, you're totally right. This all exists in your kind of banking app, and actually a lot of banking apps, right? I think the problem is it's all still such a mess. Like it's in the app, but like how often do you look at that? How much do you really know like how much you're spending? And also not all subscriptions come from your bank. So a lot of people working in tech like us, we pay for things on like Stripe once a year, and then you get an email about it. And there's a lot of like subscriptions like that, for example. So and especially if you're like running a small business or trying to start a small business, you have like personal subscriptions, you have like business ones, and it's they're kind of everywhere. So like that was something I wanted to try and start to tackle, which I haven't solved the problem yet for fully, but I just saw an opportunity to make something extremely brutally simple, which even though I love Monzo, does feel a little bit hidden within the app.
So what you're trying to say is basically like even someone big, like any big bank or even Monzo, they're not sort of the best player to kind of like cover all of the specific needs that you're trying to tackle. Is that what you're trying to say?
Exactly. Perfect. Yeah. I think they could be, but even then, like Monzo is almost like that, or any bank is just like your overall management for money, and I think there's still a room for a niche which just helps you do subscription management and maybe a little bit more into budgeting one day. But I think the experience can be extremely simple and stand out for that reason.
Well, that's exactly why I'm asking you, because anyone who's outside of this space might go and say, hey, why are you really building this when there's so many banks that could actually integrate this into their bank? And just kind of like, I think it would be good to know your take on basically on this, but let's forget about Orbit for now.
Sure.
I I tell a lot of my clients, and I work with a lot of my clients who basically understand, right, how can we actually win, whether it's Google or Amazon or any giant out there. Because I think what's happened over the last 10, 15 years is a lot of the giants, they have really, let's say, consolidated a lot of the spaces. So like, take Amazon, like they're really trying to cover absolutely everything within the e-commerce, right? I mean, look at many of the banks now, right? They're trying to go outside of the banking space,
Yeah.
right? They're trying to do, I don't know, insurance and many other things. So the question becomes for a lot of the very small players, and to be honest, not even small players, businesses making, I don't know, $1 to $100 million in revenue, how do they compete with the giants while still understanding the fact that those guys can easily get into their space and, basically take away their market share? And again, I think this is why your example is interesting, because just to sum up here, my take is I don't think that you can any longer compete on the, let's say, on the function level, meaning that, I mean, everyone can replicate anything, especially with vibe coding and AI coding and all that. And we're going to talk about that later. I think everything is now going to be pretty much about the UX, overall gamification, entertainment, branding, rather than functionality itself, right? Because what I see lately, again, over the last 10 years, is sometimes I've seen someone rolling out like a unique feature and you would go, wow, that's amazing, very unique feature. I barely remember any feature like that over the last 2 years where like a feature specifically would surprise me.
Yeah.
So I think now, again, my thesis is that it comes down to all of those things like branding, UX, positioning, serving, like a micro niche and stuff like that, rather than the tech side itself. But yeah, what's your take on this, really?
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think we can talk more about design here, because I do think this is going to be
Yeah, that's why I'm curious.
Yeah. So I think with all of this technological shift in AI and everything, and the way people can build and anyone can build immediately, I think there's just old rules of life which are now ringing even truer. And I think that is all around differentiation. And I think, like you said, like design is going to be a key player here. I think differentiation matters more than anything, because like you say, like almost anyone can build, they can build very quickly. And like you said, you can easily replicate function, but I think the key difference here will be the experience, because if you look at like a lot of people that maybe aren't even in design, they'll be vibe coding, and like building stuff a lot. And a lot of it is going to look the same, which means that the experience will matter most, just as you perfectly summarized earlier. And I think this is great if you do come from a design background, but also for people that do want to get more into that, I think you just need to start paying more attention to what you feel like is a good experience, to start training your perception and skills of like how you can employ that into your product, if you don't come from a design background. So I feel very like confident that this is a huge new opportunity to like just make beautiful products that work really well. And someone that inspires me along the Orbit journey is actually Flighty. I think like they are an exceptional use case of a product. There's products that existed before them. They do now. People compete with them now, but the quality of the experience is their moat. Obviously, they have some amazing technical stuff, but really it's just the craft which leads them.
But do you think it's still, like, I know that's a hard question probably, and you probably can't separate the two, but do you think that it's more of a design challenge or is it more of a marketing challenge?
Oh, great question.
Because then, let's just pretend, take Orbit again. And it's really cool again because you're building it on threads and you're trying to really tap into the community, asking people, getting feedback and stuff like that. And again, that's a marketing angle, right? That it enables you to essentially grow. But let's just pretend for a moment, that design was different. Would it be, would growth be different now too? Or is it, they're both equally important?
I think, yeah, you nailed it with positioning. I think for good positioning, you really just need to simply understand like exactly what problem is your product solving and for who. And that's the positioning question, right? Like this is something that I don't think Orbit does very well right now, actually. Even like when I launched, I just wanted to validate that people would pay for it, like, and that anyone actually cared enough to pay. So thankfully those things are good. I can start going now and improving it. And positioning is definitely one of the big next things, because you could just say you're a subscription tracker for everyone, for example, in my case, but there's so many people that have no intent to do that. And actually what I'm starting to realize is people in tech like you and me who have lots of subscriptions have this problem the most, or at least I feel like I'm in a place to execute it in a way where I can do a good job for those people. So I totally agree. I think positioning is also a huge part of it. I think and it's really hard to do. So I think the key thing is just like speaking to people and really trying to resonate with like who you're building for, and having a lot of conversations.
Yeah, but then again, like let's take Orbit as an example, right? So we've now sort of understood and discussed kind of this idea of like how do you compete with the giants, and the answer probably again, as you said, is both marketing and design. But then I'm also seeing like a lot of people now replicating a lot of the SaaS products and apps. You've seen a lot of vibe coding stuff on social media. And I've even seen a website, I'm not sure if you've seen it, like you basically enter a website.
Oh, the clone one. Yeah.
And it fully replicates the design of that. Have you seen that?
Yeah, crazy. I really don't understand why it's been made, to be honest.
Yeah, but again, like, so it's clear how giants can compete, how you can compete with the giants, but then someone else who's now following you on threads, they might say, hey, Orbit is such a cool idea, let me go replicate the app because it's so relatively easy to do. So how do you kind of like, what is the moat there? How do you build these barriers? Again, is it then a marketing sort of challenge or still design?
Yeah, dude, great question. And also, I have had a competitor who looks like they literally slapped it into ChatGPT and then just like completely copied the app.
Really?
Yeah, crazy. Like a few days ago, my friend sent me like a message, and he was like, "Check this out." And they literally copied it. It was space themed, had like the Orbit dialogue, and they were asking for feedback on Reddit. Like, yeah, what do you guys think? Like, so we can definitely talk about that.
And they launched after you launched.
Oh yeah, I think they must have launched within like 2 days. Like it was, like because it looked terrible, and I think that is part of my answer to your question of like what is the moat. So we've talked about design, positioning, which is part of it. I think quality and community are also two really key pillars of this. So everyone saw this like copycat, and actually even on Reddit, people were like, this looks kind of terrible, and that's obviously they didn't care much. That's like minus care to the like average person, right? So I think quality is like really just caring about what you're building is one thing, but I think community is another. Like I think if we're thinking directly about these like small, like indie or software businesses or a small team of 10, I think you just have to be like really engaged with your community and demo it to people. I think this is like something that goes a long way. And I've noticed so far.
I would slightly though disagree here, and I just want to, interested in your take again. So we have clients that basically pay for, let's just call it ugly SaaS products. I'll just say that, because obviously like this is very, very subjective, what's good, what's bad. But the point is, we have clients who are paying for some ugly SaaS products, like let's say $20 a month as an example. Now the best product, the best SaaS product in that space charges like $80, right? So then what a lot of our clients do, they say, hey, we know, like when we recommend them something, we say, you know what, like this would actually work better in your case. They say, yeah, we know, but this is ugly, but it's $20 a month. I mean, obviously this is a random number, but while this is 80 and it's perfect. So I'm just very curious to understand like where's that line. I'll give you a good example. I've recently seen, all of those email signature apps.
Oh yeah. Oh.
So they charge like $10 a month to basically just sign a document.
Yeah.
So I've seen a couple of people vibe coding and building their own sort of email signature app so that you could upload a file, sign it, and then you send it over via email. And then that app is a lot simpler than something like DocuSign, and it's like $1 instead of $10 a month. And when I've seen it, I'm like, yeah, I mean, this is this is barely past MVP stage, like
Yeah.
barely. But just the fact that it's $1, I do think it might be. I mean, it depends on the context of the market, of the niche, of the problem, but it might be enough. And this is why
Mm.
I'm thinking like where do we draw that line? Because I absolutely understand like where you coming from. Like, and you know, you've been building a lot of stuff, and I think we both have like very high standards when it comes to like building
Mm.
something. But I also realize now, especially on LinkedIn, a lot of people are just building something like something random. They put a very low price, and the market actually responds very well
Mm.
because I think the general audience very often, and I don't know if you're going to agree here or not, they don't care about the design,
Yeah.
um, or sometimes even about the experience. They care about the very, very core product. You know, back to my example with the signature apps, right? You just put a signature, that's it. Like they don't care
Mm.
if they have customer support, you know, mobile version, whatever. It looks ugly, the sign is ugly, no branding, does the job for $1.
Mm.
So that's something I've been thinking about a lot. And what's your take there? Because I think it's a tricky one because you might be spending a lot of time and effort and money, and the reality is actually the person needed just a $1 thing, even if it's ugly. I think I don't know why this analogy just comes to my mind now. It's like with all of the low cost airlines,
Yeah.
we've got Ryanair,
It gets you there.
it gets you there, right?
Yeah.
And then on so many levels, you can still argue, this is not great, this is awful, but people are like, you know what, this is enough. Because to sum up my point here, and then I'll let you share your opinion. I do think we're still living through a period where a lot of people are just forced to pay for SaaS product just because they basically just charge you money.
Yeah.
And I think when we're going to see, again, back to my, signature example, if you want to keep paying $10 a month, cool, just keep paying. But if you want the ugly version, the low cost, like the
Mm.
Ryanair version of DocuSign, go ahead. Just $1 a month and that's it. So I'm curious just to understand, what do you think about this?
Yeah, dude, this is so great. It actually, like, so I've got 3 points I think are relevant here, but just a quick one. I think it's so interesting how the plane analogy is so good, like Ryanair versus like Emirates. And yeah, I think just this new like accessibility we have to building essentially, like with AI and everything, like it allows you to build the low cost version of Emirates, but which is DocuSign. And I think that is fascinating. So like I think one part is there is just this now building accessibility that a lot of people have, which is like like the friction's low, right? So it's an entry point. I think to yeah, I've not like articulated this well perfectly yet. It's just something that I've also been thinking about. But I think there's like three interesting like levers here, which probably have some kind of crossover in one way. I think there's like price accessibility, like you kind of talked about a bit, before. So like DocuSign, I have no idea how much that costs, but let's just say it's $100 a month. I've absolutely no idea. Yeah, there is a $1 version now, and you can use it, and it'll be quick and it'll do the job. I think there's like intent. Like DocuSign is primarily for like B2B businesses, but in the other example, like maybe there's, I don't know if you've seen these like AI photo shoot products where you can get like an amazing
Yeah.
headshot. Those are always a great example because they're like the same, like Emirates is the photographer, and then that is like what the $20 output of like just doing it in 10 minutes. I think there's one of like price accessibility where like these cheaper options are serving people that just couldn't be served before. I think there's intent. Like you've got I want the best experience, which could be a really good photographer, could be the Emirates plane versus, the lower cost airline or the AI headshot thing. And service. I think it's just like, what kind of product are you building? Because if it is a quick flight or an AI headshot thing, those are like very quick. And maybe you don't need a lot of like customer service there. But if you're building something which is like an ongoing daily service, maybe it requires like a higher level of quality. And I think that's like again, on this like high end of the matrix. So I think I don't know what the name for this would be. Maybe you should try and find a name for it. But I think with like price accessibility, intent, and service, there's this like bottom end of like a kind of classic graph matrix where there is just such a lower friction to build, which now the market is kind of waking up to with like AI and allowing people to do this. I think it's super interesting. It's basically like a whole section of product which hasn't been built before in a way, if that makes sense.
But do you think it will eventually like help expand the market, or like will it make markets consolidate into sort of fewer players, right? Because again, let's just use my example of the signature thing, right? Let's pretend I don't know, I don't have the numbers, but let's pretend there's now 20 big players out there, right? Once more and more people start building, the low cost versions of that and doing marketing successfully, will that lead to only, three of the big players staying in the market, and then we have only another three, low cost versions? Or do you think we'll then just have those 20 apps, the big players remaining there, and then we have another 50 low cost versions on top of that?
This is such a good question. I think I really wish I'd love to dive into this more actually, because it's a really, really good question, like in terms of how markets just work. But I think we are in a very early moment now where the market is like expanding and rushing because we've gone through this technological shift. I think 1 year from now, I think things will have like slowed down a little bit in terms of all these lower cost versions coming out. So like one quick example is like when I was thinking and building and launching Orbit, there wasn't tons of subscription trackers that I was aware of. Like there were a lot, but now in the past week, I've just noticed there are absolutely like tens, like nearly 100 I can find online easily. And they've all come up very quickly. So I think there's a rush that's expanding now with a lot of lower cost versions. There are some big players, but maybe in like 6 months to a year, we'll still have some of the big players which hung around and maybe eventually built what the lower cost, quicker ones could. But I still think there will be like lower cost options in the future, just because I think a lot of the people building now will probably give up. Like it's just natural. Like we naturally give up, right? So there's like that's one element, and I think it'll also just mean that competition has like forced a few diamonds at the top, and then also a few roughly good stones down the line. So I think that's just part of like an overall bigger wave. And then when the next sub wave of AI comes out, like maybe you can, you know what I mean? Like there'll be some other technological thing. The market will like juice back up again, and then be like 20 more low cost versions come out. You know what I mean? So I think it'll just come and go in waves, and the people who really want to build and make money and are successful with it, they will stick around on both sides of the top and the bottom of the matrix.
I'll give you, so my opinion on this is, I think again, the way I see it, at least, the best example is all of the coffee shops in the UK, at least. So if you think about it, like very often, at least previously, like, like years ago, I was like, there's absolutely no way like that the coffee market could expand even, and get bigger and bigger. And still, I don't know, yeah, probably in your area as well. So you keep seeing more and more, coffee places. And I'm there thinking, man, I've got all the possible coffee spots in my area already, and you still have these slight mini, specialty coffee. I've seen this yesterday, literally. Some country in Africa, they export, and that's their whole positioning, really. Some specialty coffee. So a lot of the coffee here is like Latin America, and then they're doing like African coffee. Just got me thinking. The way I see it, there's always going to be just micro differentiation, really, because if I was asked probably like previously, I would just think, look, clearly Starbucks, Costa, and a couple of other players are just going to massively consolidate the space. And I don't know if you remember when Pret, they used to have the subscription.
Oh yeah, it was like just before or after the pandemic. I can't remember.
Yeah, so I honestly overestimated how the effect of that, because I actually thought that people stopped going to the smaller places, because like £20 a month, you get unlimited coffee every single day. Is just like, why would you go to other places? And that was a very interesting example for me that nope, people still keep going to all of the other places, and new places keep opening up. And I think it's going to be kind of like the same here, the way I see it, at least.
In software.
It's going to be a lot of differentiation, micro differentiation on many different levels, whether it's pricing, whether it's design, whether it's marketing, and there will be just demand. I think the only problem is what's happening now, and I'm not sure if you've seen like this kind of like on social, is with all of the vibe coding and AI, a lot of the SaaS products won't be won't be growing like 10x every year. So the traditional model of like VC-backed SaaS startups is essentially like the winner wins all, right? Takes the entire market. Just based on what we discussed, that there's going to be a lot of the low-cost airlines. I think it's going to really pull the market into like different mini segments and different mini markets within the big market. So I think, again, what I'm trying to lead to is in for example, your case like Orbit, you just got to be prepared, at least the way I see it, that the market size for this is, I'm going to put a random number, £5 million, right? Whereas previously, if it was like the one fits all tracker, you should be making like $1 billion and pounds a year. I think that's what's going to be different now. Even going back to the signature thing, right? It's like a company might only be making $100,000 a year, and that's it, because there's no more room for growth.
Yeah, dude, so many fascinating points. I think the coffee shop thing is super interesting. I think one thing I did think about though is like the market. So like all markets are kind of expanding in a way, right? Like you were saying, like, and I definitely think there is a huge need. I don't really have much to articulate here, but people just like locally, built stuff in a way. Either it's coffee or like software. People want like a kind of, they want to discover cool new things. And I think that's like one aspect to it. I think going back to your point, so do you think like some markets will shrink in a way when you're talking about like, say, one being 5 million and previously the dominator is like billions? Do you think so? Do you think like they'll be shrinking?
That's a good question. I mean, I do think some markets will shrink. Simply because, let me just use the simplest example. Like when I say the market will shrink, let's keep the signature thing, right? Since we're already discussing it. Let's just pretend the market for that is $10 million a year, right? And let's just pretend the marketing team for DocuSign actually has no idea how to keep growing it further. It's like, guys, everyone in the UK is already like using DocuSign to sign all of the PDFs. So then, we build like a low cost version of DocuSign for $1. So essentially what's going to happen is like in the UK, like there's no other people who theoretically
Can compete.
Who even need another, DocuSign account. So what's going to happen is the low cost version is going to take a certain percentage from that, from the DocuSign. And going back to the airlines example, I mean, I can clearly see how lately I've been flying a lot with like Wizz Air and Ryanair. Yes, I do still keep flying. I use British Airways or I use Etihad when I go to like Abu Dhabi. So I wouldn't fly Wizz Air there. But if Wizz Air wasn't there, I would still keep using British Airways or something traditional, right? So that's an example of like how the market becomes how basically like you take away a share of the competitors' market. But with airlines, again, airlines is actually an example where lower prices make you fly essentially more. Because, for example,
it's very unique.
Yeah, like, my sister lives in Germany and sometimes she's like, hey Vlad, come visit me. I go on Ryanair and I'm like, perfect. I'm going to go to Germany simply because it's that cheap. Whereas if it was £400 return, I would say, you know what, I can do it, once a year. But back to my example with email, and all of the signatures, I don't think the market specifically in that case will expand. We'll only see people kind of like canceling their DocuSign subscription and saying, you know what, I'm totally fine with this very budget version of that.
Yeah.
So again, to sum up, I think it really depends on the nature of the market, and the simple question to ask yourself is, if the prices became lower in this niche specifically, would it incentivize more demand or no?
Yeah, super interesting. I think so. I think broadly yes, just because it's like when we talked about earlier, like price accessibility. Broadly yes, but the interesting thing, analogies are so helpful here. Like if it's keeping to planes, like you said, you would take Wizz Air for like 2 hours, but you wouldn't take it for like 6 hours, right? Because you're you respect your legs.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and I think there must be some analogy. Like I'm trying to kind of like think about my take, like, you know, with my product, like there probably is, if there's like a quicker task which you need done, and it's like $1, yeah, maybe. But then I think a longer term experience via software, like maybe the 6-hour flight holds its value and the cost, right? So yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I think overall the competition is going to get squeezed, which is great for consumers. You know, so now, for example, like I've been doing a bit of like positioning research myself and like looking at like the App Store, for example, and there is hundreds of subscription trackers. And I'm like, for me, it's like, okay, what's my differentiation? But I don't know, there's other levers that are quite interesting, like basically the SEO version of the App Store, ASO, you type in like subscription management, only a few are going to be in the top 5, which people actually see, you know, and it's similar to like the short haul flights. Like you can use Wizz Air or EasyJet or, you know, I think maybe it's just by price. Maybe that's like the differentiator there. But yeah, I think like it's going to be a big squeeze and there will be a lot of players, but yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see like how that plays out.
You know, one other interesting thing that I actually saw recently is some businesses start, because of, again, AI and vibe coding and all that, some businesses starting building those relatively simple apps for free. But then that serves as kind of like a lead magnet that helps them get the customer kind of like on the hook
Yeah.
and leads them towards their website and then explains what they actually do. I think that's potentially something very interesting as well. Like imagine, I don't know, I can't think of like a really good example, but like imagine you do something, maybe you're a lawyer. Like I'm not even joking. Maybe you're a lawyer and you hire a just a full stack developer who builds this like free like email signature thing, and then the lawyer, like imagine it's like vladthelawyer.com, right?
Yeah.
So vladthelawyer.com, you know, and then it's sign docs. So I'll be just using that for free to sign all of my docs. But the moment I need a lawyer, I'm like, it's Vlad the lawyer.
That's amazing. Someone's buying that right now.
Yeah, vladthelawyer.com. But I think we're going to see a lot of that. And again, I'm very curious. I mean, there's no easy answer here, and I think this is why I'm finding it really hard to.
These are all amazing questions. They're good.
Articulate some of this stuff, but I think my thesis is that a lot of the SaaS products that exist out there, people will still have the demand to use them, but because of the low cost, you know, to build something, people will get that for free essentially. And I think that's what's going to change. But then again, imagine if, back to my signature example, if people are using it for free, right? How are you making money then as a person, as a business, right? So then surely, then that needs to be again, kind of like a lead magnet, a marketing thing in your funnel, so that this SaaS product, cool, I know I can vibe code it and build it for like $2,000, whatever it is. But then we know that over 6 months, because people can use it for free, that will get us like 10 clients for all of my other services.
Yeah.
And I don't have an answer, just to be honest straight away. It's going to be very interesting to see how many, you know, of the SaaS products, services are gonna become basically a commodity.
Yeah.
Because the tricky thing here, like going back to like the Wizz Air Emirates example, that all makes sense, right? But I think with a lot of the products, people are almost not gonna care about the branding at all. Like, I mean, take like clothes, for example, right? The branding plays a huge role. And this is why you can go to Primark and get like a t-shirt for £3, and you can go to any of the expensive shops and you can get it for like £300, right? But again, because branding can play a huge role. But again, in an example like the email signature thing, I don't think it's even possible to pull off the whole, you know, branding, marketing angle, like building for the community, because it's ultimately contradicting itself. Like let's say you DocuSign and you're trying to pull off the whole community angle. So there you go. You're like, yeah, people will love you, but you're gonna pay us £10 a month. So that's where I think it's tough, because you still want to be making money, especially all of the SaaS businesses who've got the VC funding behind them, like they're forced to keep growing like 5x, every year.
Yeah.
Whereas someone like you, and that's what I honestly think what you're doing is interesting, because if you get the pricing right, if you get the whole, positioning right, and the tactical sort of the tactics of growing on social media, I think then it's a win. I mean, obviously it's a win for you, but for me, taking your case specifically, which I hope kind of like ties to everything we've been discussing here, when is that moment when when a consumer says, you know what, Josh got this amazing app, I'm going to use it because it's better and because I love Josh, and we engage on threads and a couple of other things, versus using it for free on my Monzo, where how do I mean, maybe you have some thoughts now, and like, how do you see this?
Yeah. No, dude, I think there's a couple of interesting points. So actually, early in my orbit journey, I asked someone about it, and I was like just talking about it conceptually, and they actually said exactly what you just said. They said, "Oh, what if you use it as like a lead magnet?" And that was almost the direction I went. But I just didn't really feel like it was correct in my intuition, so I didn't. But so there's one, I think, outside of software, like, people like to spend money on things that make them feel good, and I do wonder if this will kind of go over to software too. So, like, you can get extremely cheap t-shirts, but it's not like the 100% cotton, like really nice branded version, because it makes you feel good. Now, I think that doesn't apply to your DocuSign example, because there's just not much materialization to DocuSign. Like, I think it's just one of those products, like, I don't care what, it's just a bit of HTML. You can't feel good about maybe you can. Maybe there's a market where, like, your email footer can just be like the Gucci of email footers. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe someone needs to try that. But I think I do believe it's possible that people do feel like that same feeling of, like, a really, really cheap car versus a Mercedes, and they feel good using the software. I think there is, like, for me, I get that, but that's because I'm in tech and, like, I appreciate it. So maybe my intent matches, like, that analogy in software, right? Maybe for most people it doesn't. But I still think that there's this invisible layer of quality people feel. And yeah, I don't have like a good articulation for this either, but I do feel like there is that feeling of, like, you want to buy the, car Mercedes version of software sometimes. And maybe it just depends on, like, if that's something you like. Because for me, I'm not super interested in buying, like, expensive fashion. I just like fashion that makes me feel good, right? But I'm not that kind of key person to be like, I really want this, like, I want to feel good by owning this piece of fashion, which is like a different archetype.
I'm gonna kind of like, my opinion is, I do, and this is why, we've been discussing so many examples and analogies from the offline world, right, with the airlines, and
Make it make
my
sense.
thesis is that it's definitely going to be exactly like offline. Branding is going to matter more and more, community, obviously tech, and so many other things. So that's why exactly you go and buy coffee, from this coffee shop rather than just going to a Costa. Right? But I do think, especially given the context of inflation, rising costs, I do think pricing is going to be a huge one.
Yeah.
Because I'll give you like hopefully a very good example. So in the UK, we've got this app called, what it's called? Laundry. I think it's Laundry Heap.
I've not used it. No.
Basically, look, for all of the dry cleaning stuff, right? There's an app now, and it's amazing. Don't get me wrong, and I've actually used it once. You download the app, you select a time slot. The person comes collect your shirts and everything. Comes back tomorrow or whenever you choose the time slot. Perfect. What's interesting? So where I live, I've got this very old school, offline.
Oh yeah.
Just a normal, like, high street, just dry cleaners. But the price is nearly, I think it's like 40% lower. So I literally just got their phone number, and they told me, Vlad, just call whenever you're ready.
It's more convenient.
And lower price. Yes, they don't have an app. They're very, very old school dry cleaners. But all I literally just call them, and I'm like, hey, I've got 15 shirts. Can you come collect? And they literally come collect in 30, 40 minutes. So back to the app, the way it works is pretty much like yeah, well, kind of different, but Fat Lamb are just like a marketplace, right? But these guys would essentially take all of your clothes and they give you that amazing experience, but they would go to the exact same dry cleaners because they're not
Mm,
building like any
right.
new places, right? So what's interesting is from a UI UX perspective, and I love great UI UX. I love all of the the tech stuff, obviously the convenience of adding the time slots. I love it, but there's a difference every time. If I book it through the app, let's just say it's going to be £60, and if I call these guys directly, yes, it's old school. There's no app, but it's going to be £40,
Mm,
and you're getting the exact same service. So this is where I think what's interesting is previously, and I don't know, maybe you disagree here. Previously, a lot of the digital products were often associated as being cheaper than the offline analogy or the offline service.
mm,
Whereas now, what I'm noticing at least, a lot of the digital stuff is actually becoming more expensive. So
mm.
back to my, sort of back to our whole conversation on price, design, UI, UX. It's going to be interesting to see which of those amazing apps survive. And again, I think it
Mm,
comes down to the market specifically and the market need. But again, if someone now vibe codes this whole app for all of the dry cleaners and just adds, let's say, 50p on top, because the
mm.
overheads is just one full stack developer, um, and then gives it probably for free to all of the
Crazy.
old school dry cleaners and says, hey guys, literally just going to charge you 50p on every order. That's it.
That's wild. Yeah.
Whereas a traditional, like, I mean, how much money and time and effort it costs to build an app, right? So, and especially if it's kind of like an enterprise scalable app.
Mm,
So those guys, like, back to my example with the dry cleaning app, they, even theoretically, they're not able to charge like 50p because they've got like 10 developers, they've got designers, they've got engineers, and so on and so on. Whereas now, again, if one person is able to code that and give it nearly for free, I think it's going to change stuff a lot.
big time.
So, but yeah, ultimately, I mean, what I'm trying to say is I don't have an answer, but I
Mm,
think what I disagree with is when people just say, oh, you know, either big. I think it's black and white now very often. Like you hear some people just saying, no, the giant companies will keep winning, and then the small guys will just keep losing, or vice versa. Saying, oh, the small guys will now beat everyone in the space, and then the big companies will disappear. So I'm struggling so far to understand like where's this line between what's going to help you win in this day and age of AI. But to sum it up, I think just give your take on a tactical level again, because you're literally right now growing and you're trying to succeed on threads, like very, very specific things. Like, what do you think is going to help you, especially since we've now discussed so many things?
yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, keep it real. Like, what are the things that you think will help you? Because I think there's three things really, again, just to sum it up. Competing with the giants, in your case, someone like Monzo. Um, Secondly, like, how do you actually stand out when anyone can build? And by stand out, I think based on everything we've discussed, it's not just the design, it's the pricing,
Mm,
it's the
mm.
marketing, service, and so many other things. Yeah. So what's the tactics there?
Yeah, dude, figuring it out all right now because it's such an interesting time. Before I dive into tactics, I wanted to give you like an analogy, which not an analogy, an example, sorry, of like a real case of everything you just talked about. So everyone's aware of Buffer, which are actually like a 70-person team, and obviously they've been around for like 10, 13 years. I don't know if
Mm,
you've like heard of this guy on Twitter, but like Jack Fricks. He's this like young dude, like coding. He created a tool called Postbridge, which is doing all the social media stuff, but for like an absolute fraction of the cost. And like because so many people are discovering him on Twitter, he's just got great like engagement and sales. Maybe not everyone that discovers Buffer will discover Postbridge, and that's like a different problem which
mm,
can be solved. But yeah, a real life, trying to take on Buffer, which was a giant because only they could do it 10 years ago, but now it's not the case. Super interesting. Um, what am I doing? What's my tactics? So yeah, figuring it all all right now, honestly. Literally, the past 2 days, I've been thinking about like positioning, like what's my next move, how will I win. I did get one review from someone who said like this is so much better than Rocket Money, which is an American company which does like, you connect all your bank account and like it's like a lot more expensive. I think it's like $100 a year or something near that. And I guess I've beaten them on price, and it's just simplicity. Like I think for what they wanted, they probably just wanted to see upcoming spending, and it's probably just like they wanted like one very micro thing, which I'm doing a lot simpler than Rocket Money is, right? So I think it's one of those angles like say Rocket Money does like 10 things, and say Orbit does 3 of them. I'm now serving the people who wanted those 3 better than the people who wanted the 10 things that Rocket Money does, right? So I guess, like you said, positioning. So for me, I really need to figure out like some really key positioning. And I'll give you a really another nice example of this. There's a guy called Matt on Twitter building a product called Real Farm. And this helps you to create like kind of UGC TikTok videos. And when he launched it, he just launched it as a AI UGC TikTok video generator, which is kind of quite like generic.
Yeah.
He actually talked about this. You can find the tweet or I'll share it with you. He said when he changed the positioning, like literally the titling on the website, to automate the TikTok videos for your business. So it's like people that are building small software businesses, they need to create that reach on TikTok. He was just speaking directly to them in positioning. So I think that's like another key thing around positioning I need to figure out too. So that's one of my tactics. Need to figure out that. Need to figure out like on a functional level, how much do I want to compete? Exactly what you talked about, because there's things where like I'm getting compared to Rocket Money in certain ways, because there's some people with like a lot lower intent that want the convenience of just like connect to my bank account, connect to my email, show me all of my hidden subscriptions, versus you've got people that have like higher intent with a lower kind of willingness to pay, which are like, no, I'm actually quite happy to do it manually. Maybe just do like a way where I can add a PDF. So it's like there's 2 different parts, and it's the opposite ends of the scale. So spending time there, figuring it out, and then of course, like aside of all of that, continuing to build like an amazing product that I'm proud of and people want to pay for. So yeah, don't have a definite answer there, but
that's why we're discussing it, keeping it very real, because I don't think, at least 99% of people don't have like an answer like how to build something in this day and age of AI. Like everyone just keeps playing, but there's no answer really.
Consumers will win, like out of all the people building, right? Because more approachable for everyone. Like everyone's aware of like MKBHD, the tech guy on YouTube. He talks a lot about like this in the Android market, because there's obviously there's a few iPhones you can choose from, but in the Android world, you can choose from like literally 10,000 devices. There's so many, and consumers win there. And also they serve like little micro niches in Android. Like maybe you want the phone that does this or the phone that does this. So I think that's very relevant in an analogy to like the software side, right? Like we are kind of going through this process where the market's expanding so much. It's almost like maybe you can't win the entire market you're working in, but you can try and win a niche within it. And maybe that's the target.
Yeah. The only thing I'll say here, I think you're exactly right. Like honestly, because I think years ago and all of the pitch decks, and you've been seeing everyone saying we're building an ecosystem, and that was the buzzword.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Ecosystem. And I think especially now, at least, I think that's the wrong approach. Like because there's never an end to an ecosystem. And what's worse, you're actually going to be building more and being nothing
for everyone,
and solving none of the problems at the end of the day. So I think that's where you're right. Like maybe just build 3 things and just keep kind of like expanding the audience based on only those 3 things, rather than being everything to everyone. And I think that's the challenge in the day and age of AI is kind of like, because of the low barriers, the low cost of entry, you have that ambition to build everything because it's so quick. But I think from a strategic point of view, you should just say, I know it's quick to build, but I'm actually not going to build.
Yeah.
Because it's going to harm and damage my entire brand and positioning and all that. I think very often what I ask myself is like what we're not going to build, rather than what we are going to build. So again, I think what's clear is building a product is very different to building a business. And I think that's what people are confusing now a lot. It's like,
Yeah.
saying, hey, it's so quick to code this. And I'm like, yeah, but it's a product. Like a product is a huge part of the business, but there's still, marketing, there's customer service, there's so many other things that you need to factor in. And I think that's going to be still the biggest challenge out there, building a
100%.
business rather than just like a product.
Yeah, dude, 100%. You nailed it. It's such an interesting time because something I keep thinking about recently is if we go back like even 2 years, which is just nuts. Say, I can't remember when ChatGPT came out, to be honest. Like, how long have we had it now? But let's say it didn't exist. I can't remember 2 years ago. Let's say 2023, whatever. Maybe it existed then. You had to kind of code everything without AI. And I guess like the friction to build was harder. All these problems we just talked about still existed then, but for some, like, was it harder or was it easier? Because the markets were smaller, but it was just harder to do all of those things. So it's so interesting. We're in such an interesting time where it's like the friction to build is lower and the market's getting bigger. So it's like, it's not, I wouldn't say it's harder or easier then or now, it's just different. Or maybe some parts are harder or easier. I don't know. Like it's interesting. Right? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but it's something I've been thinking a lot about.
Same. I mean, same. I think we can keep going on like for hours and hours.
Yeah.
But you know what? I hopefully, like in a year, whenever, we're going to do another podcast like this and we'll have more answers, hopefully.
Yeah.
Because I think in this day and age of AI, I mean, personally, I have more questions than answers. And even though I'm building stuff every single day, I think I just have more and more questions rather than answers. So it's kind of like one question leads to 20 questions. And I think as we've been discussing, ultimately the only way is just testing, you figure out what works, but also just don't build something for the sake of it.
Yeah,
Again,
100%.
I think that's pretty huge too. But cool. I think there's definitely, enough ideas and thoughts here. So
Dude, this was awesome.
Thanks for joining the podcast. And just in case anyone who's watching, make sure you follow this channel because I'll keep doing these. By the way, Josh, what I call these? I call it the Visionary Vibes podcast.
Love that.
So,
Love that.
Yeah, thanks for joining, Josh. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, cool. Nice chat to you, Vlad. This was awesome.
Thanks.
See you around.